"I offer you my life," said the obese woman the Mafia boss saved 20 years ago. A stormy night, a scared but fierce woman walks into a crime lord's club and says those exact words. He stares, then says one word back: accepted. Now she's under his protection, his rules, his guards, his world. But the streets are watching, and bullets want a piece of her. She's not just a survivor. She's a counselor who won't back down, even when danger follows her home. He's a king who is cruel to everyone, except her. And there's a secret. Someone inside his crew wants them dead. Another secret. Her blood might belong to his oldest enemy. Why did she really offer her life? Duty, love, or a trap? If the traitor strikes first, will his obsession save her, or destroy them both? And when the truth explodes at midnight, does this debt become their death sentence, or the only chance to end a war? The rain drums against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mateo's office, casting watery shadows across his imposing desk. Anaya's heart pounds against her ribs as his single word, accepted, echoes in the sleek space. She hadn't expected him to agree so quickly, hadn't truly prepared for what it would mean to place herself under his protection. "I don't understand," she says, her voice steadier than she feels. "Just like that?" Mateo's dark eyes track her movements as she shifts in the leather chair. He's different from her memories. No longer the young enforcer who'd carried her from the flames, but a man carved from steel and shadow. His suit probably costs more than her monthly rent, but he wears it like armor. "You thought I'd refuse?" His voice is deeper, accented with 2 decades of command. "When you walk in here after 20 years, followed by Fiore's men, asking for protection..." He leans forward, fingers steepled. "You've brought trouble to my door, Anaya. The least you can do is let me handle it." She grips the armrests, her rings clicking against the leather. "I need to keep working. My clients..." "Will have to wait." He gestures to one of his men hovering by the door. "Marco, get her things, everything she needs, and sweep her apartment for bugs." "My cat," Anaya blurts. "I have a cat, Mochi. He needs..." "The cat, too." Mateo's lip quirks slightly, the first hint of softness she's seen. "Anything else?" "My baking supplies." The words tumble out before she can stop them. At his raised eyebrow, she adds, "It helps me think. And right now, I need to think clearly about Lila." Mateo studies her for a long moment, then nods to Marco. The guard disappears silently, leaving them alone with the rain and the weight of unspoken history. "Tell me about these men who followed you," he says, reaching for a tablet. His fingers move across the screen with practiced efficiency. Anaya closes her eyes, remembering. 2 of them. One tall, thin, with a scar along his jaw. The other shorter, muscular, with a tattoo on his neck. Some kind of bird. "Phoenix," Mateo says grimly. "Fiore's new muscle. They're not known for subtlety." He sets the tablet down. "What exactly did Lila tell you about her connection to them?" "Nothing directly. She was careful, scared." Anaya opens her waterproof folder again, though she knows every detail by heart. "But she left me something, an envelope, sealed, with instructions to open it if she disappeared." Her fingers tremble slightly as she withdraws the envelope. "I haven't opened it yet. I needed to be somewhere safe first." Mateo extends his hand, but Anaya clutches the envelope tighter. "It's addressed to me." His jaw tightens, but he inclines his head. "Open it." The seal breaks with a soft tear. Inside, Anaya finds a single sheet of paper and a small vial of what looks like... Is this blood? "DNA," Mateo says, his expression unreadable. "Your client left you insurance." He reaches for his phone, barking rapid instructions in Italian to someone on the other end. Anaya unfolds the letter with trembling fingers, scanning Lila's hurried handwriting. The words blur, then snap into terrible focus. She looks up at Mateo, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you know about the fire, about why they really wanted me dead that night?" Before he can answer, the office door opens. A guard enters, speaking urgently in Italian. Mateo's expression hardens as he stands, buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. "Your apartment's been compromised," he says. "They're already there." He rounds the desk, offering his hand. "We need to move, now." Anaya stares at his outstretched hand, remembering another moment 20 years ago when he'd reached for her through the smoke. She takes it, his skin warm and calloused against hers. "What about Mochi? My things?" "Marco will handle it. Your safety is my priority." His grip tightens as he leads her toward a private elevator. I have a secure location prepared. Of course you do, she mutters, earning another almost smile. The elevator doors slide open silently. Inside, Mateo keeps her close, his body angled between her and the door. The familiar scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, fills her senses, bringing back memories she'd tried to bury. When we get there, she says, we need to talk about what's in this letter. Later. His thumb brushes across her knuckles, so briefly she might have imagined it. First, we make sure you're safe. Then we deal with Lila's secrets. The elevator descends smoothly into the garage beneath the club. 2 black SUVs wait, engines running, guards posted at strategic points. Mateo guides her toward the second vehicle, his hand warm at the small of her back. Whatever's in that letter, he says quietly as he helps her into the car. Whatever Lila knew, we'll figure it out. But from now on, you don't face any of this alone. Anaya buckles her seatbelt, watching rain streak down the bulletproof glass. I haven't been alone in a long time, Mateo. I built a life, helped people, made my own way. He slides in beside her, close enough that she feels the heat radiating from his body. And now? She meets his gaze in the dim light. Now I need to know if that life was built on lies, and I need to find Lila before those men do. The SUV pulls out into the rainy night, carrying them deeper into a web of secrets 2 decades in the making. The SUV glided through Naples' rain-slicked streets, its tinted windows turning the city lights into watercolor smears. Anaya sat beside Mateo in the back seat, her phone heavy in her hand as she dialed Marta's number. The call connected on speaker, filling the quiet interior with a familiar voice. Anaya, are you okay? You never miss evening appointments. I'm fine, Marta. Anaya caught Mateo's steady gaze, choosing her words carefully. There's been a security concern. I need to switch to telehealth for the next few days. A pause. Security concern? Should I call the police? No, Anaya said quickly. Everything's being handled, but I need you to reschedule my in-person appointments. Mark me as conducting video sessions only. Of course, papers rustled on Marta's end. What should I tell the clients? Just say I'm dealing with building maintenance issues. Keep it vague but reassuring. Mateo leaned forward slightly, his presence impossible to ignore. Your clinic's security will be upgraded starting tomorrow morning. My team will coordinate with the staff. Marta's sharp intake of breath carried through the speaker. Mr. Vitale, I understand. Anaya, call me if you need anything. After ending the call, Anaya turned to Mateo. Your rules, let's hear them. No leaving without an escort. No contact with anyone I haven't cleared. No lying to me. His voice carried the weight of command. And absolutely no attempting to negotiate with enemies. Anaya straightened her spine. My terms, then. I need uninterrupted video sessions with my clients. They're vulnerable people who depend on consistency. Agreed, with security protocols in place. Access to my encrypted client files. My IT team will set up a secure connection. And daily check-ins with Marta. My clinic needs stability. Mateo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have a telehealth suite ready in my home office by morning. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. Giorgio will handle the technical requirements. The SUV climbed higher into the hills above Naples, following a winding road that hugged the coastline. Security cameras tracked their progress at regular intervals, barely visible in the darkness. They passed through 3 checkpoints before reaching a modern building that seemed to float above the Bay of Naples. Inside, the elevator whispered upward to the penthouse level. Mateo's hand rested at the small of her back as they stepped into a foyer of cream marble and indirect lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering city below, while state-of-the-art security systems blinked discreetly from strategic points. You're sweet, Mateo said, leading her down a hallway lined with original artwork. He opened double doors to reveal a spacious room done in soft grays and deep blues. Anaya stepped inside, taking in details that made her breath catch. The walk-in closet held several sets of designer loungewear in her size. Not just any brands, but the specific Italian label she'd splurged on last year. The bathroom counter displayed her preferred French body products, and the kitchenette was stocked with her favorite herbal teas, obscure brands she usually had to order specially from London. How long have you been watching me? She asked, picking up a tin of lavender chamomile blend. Long enough to ensure your safety. His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. The staff will bring your things from the apartment once they're cleared. She ran her fingers along the soft fabric of a lounging pants set. These aren't common in Italy. Neither are you. He moved to the windows, adjusting the smart glass opacity. Get some rest. We'll discuss Lila's letter in the morning. Anaya watched him retreat, noting how he checked sightlines and exit routes with practiced ease. The door closed with a soft click, leaving her alone in the carefully curated space that spoke of years of distant observation. She changed into the perfectly fitted loungewear, trying not to think about how he knew her measurements. The bed welcomed her with just the right amount of firmness, another detail he'd somehow learned. Outside, boat horns echoed across the bay, their mournful sounds muffled by thick glass. The lights dimmed gradually to a warm golden glow, controlled by some unseen system. Anaya lay awake, surrounded by evidence of Matteo's long-range protection, or surveillance, depending on how she looked at it. Every item in the room represented a piece of information gathered, a preference noted, a habit observed. The tea selection alone told a story. Her switch from English breakfast to green tea 3 years ago, her recent preference for caffeine-free evening blends, even the specific Indian chai she'd discovered at a London specialty shop. The body products were the exact ones she used, down to the rose hip facial oil she'd started importing from France last spring. Security cameras monitored the perimeter, their presence marked by tiny red lights. Guards patrolled outside. She caught glimpses of their movements in the reflection of nearby buildings. The entire penthouse hummed with hidden technology, layers of protection wrapped around her like invisible silk. A bottle of sleep-promoting magnesium supplements sat on the nightstand, the same brand she'd mentioned in passing to a client last month. She'd been fighting insomnia lately, a fact apparently not lost on her watchful protector. The boat horns continued their conversation across the water as Naples settled into its nighttime rhythm. Below, waves crashed against the shoreline, their sound deliberately allowed through the otherwise soundproofed windows. Anaya remembered mentioning once, to no one in particular, that she found the sound of waves soothing. Matteo had been listening, watching, gathering these small details of her life like precious stones. Each item in the room represented a thread of connection maintained across 20 years, a silent promise kept while she built her independent life, believing herself alone. The golden lights dimmed further, responding to her stillness. Even the air temperature adjusted automatically to her preference for sleeping cool. She closed her eyes, surrounded by the accumulated evidence of Matteo's careful attention, wondering what other observations he'd made during their years apart. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Anaya's eyes fluttered open. The unfamiliar ceiling took a moment to place, but the gentle sound of waves below helped ground her. 6:20 a.m., her usual wake time despite the late night. She padded to the kitchen, bare feet silent on heated floors. Opening cabinets revealed a carefully stocked pantry that made her pause. There, arranged in neat rows, were the Sri Lankan spices she'd grown up with, fresh curry leaves, cardamom pods, and the specific brand of cinnamon her mother had always used. Her throat tightened at the sight. Baking had always been her refuge, a way to process anxiety through measured ingredients and predictable outcomes. She gathered what she needed for small cardamom buns, the methodical work anchoring her racing thoughts. "You're beautiful," she whispered to her reflection in the brushed steel refrigerator, a daily ritual of self-acceptance. "Your curves are strong. Your body carries you through each day with grace." The familiar mantra settled her nerves as she kneaded the enriched dough. She was dusting the counter with flour when footsteps approached. Matteo entered in fitted workout gear, a thin sheen of sweat highlighting defined muscles. A familiar scar peeked from beneath his shirt near his ribs, the same one she'd glimpsed 20 years ago when he'd carried her from the flames. "You're baking," he observed, reaching for a bottle of water. "It helps me think." She shaped the dough into small rounds. "That scar, from the fire?" His hand brushed the spot unconsciously. "Yes, the beam that nearly trapped us. I remember smoke, arms around me, your voice saying to hold on." She paused, looking up. Someone else was there too? Marco. Something flickered across Matteo's face. "My mentor. He got us to the window, but the floor gave way when he went back for others." His jaw tightened. "He taught me everything about leading the family." Before Anaya could respond, footsteps approached with military precision. Renzo, Matteo's head of security, appeared in tactical gear, tablet in hand. "Sir!" 2 men spotted near Ms. Pereira's old address at 0200 hours. Black sedan, no plates. Matches the description from the clinic surveillance. Matteo's expression hardened. He typed rapidly on his phone, likely messaging additional security teams. Double the patrols. I want eyes on every approach. Anaya's hands stilled in the dough. The men hunting her were getting closer, more bold. She forced herself to keep working, the familiar motions soothing her nerves as she rolled each bun with careful precision. By mid-morning, she was settled into the new telehealth suite Mateo had arranged. The setup was professional. Dual monitors, encrypted connection, sound-dampening panels on the walls. Her first client appeared on screen at 10 a.m. sharp. In the hallway, Mateo leaned against the wall, not listening to the confidential sessions, but monitoring the cadence of Anaya's voice. Her tone remained steady and compassionate as she guided her clients through their trauma. Even while dealing with her own crisis, the sound of her work grounded him as much as baking grounded her. Between sessions, she emerged to find fresh coffee waiting, small gestures of care woven through the fortress of protection he'd built around her. Early afternoon found them on the covered balcony, the autumn sun warming the space despite the breeze off the bay. Anaya gripped the railing, watching boats cut white trails through blue water far below. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly, "but I won't let them make me disappear into hiding. My clients need me. I need my work." Mateo moved closer, his presence solid beside her. "You'll have protection, without compromise. I won't apologize for keeping you safe, but I won't cage you either." She nodded, accepting the terms of this careful balance between security and independence. The wind carried salt and distant music from the harbor, reminding her that life continued beyond their protected bubble. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Reading it, his expression remained neutral, but his shoulders tensed slightly. "I need to take this privately. It's about escorting you to the clinic this evening." As he stepped away to make the call, Anaya returned to the kitchen, where her morning's work had yielded a dozen perfect cardamom buns. The familiar scent wrapped around her like armor, preparation for whatever came next. She could be afraid and still move forward. She could accept protection without losing herself. The spices that had greeted her that morning caught her eye again. Such specific choices, such careful attention to detail. Every cabinet held evidence of how well Mateo knew her habits, her comfort foods, her daily rituals. Even in their years apart, he'd ensured she had what she needed to feel at home in this gilded cage. Through the balcony doors, she could see him pacing as he spoke, his free hand moving in sharp gestures that betrayed tension. Whatever plans were being made for the clinic visit clearly concerned him. Yet he'd agreed to take her, understanding that she couldn't abandon her responsibilities. She wrapped a still warm bun in a napkin and brought it to him, a peace offering of sorts. His conversation paused as he accepted it, fingers brushing hers in a gesture that felt both casual and intentional. The small exchange spoke volumes. Her acknowledgement of his protection, his respect for her autonomy, their shared understanding that neither would bend completely to the other's will. The autumn sun had already set when the black SUV pulled up to Anaya's clinic. Security cameras tracked their arrival, newly installed after the incident yesterday. Through tinted windows, she could see the familiar walk-ins welcome sign glowing in warm yellow light. Mateo's hand touched her arm before she could reach for the door handle. 40 minutes, not a second more!" His voice was quiet but left no room for debate. "Renzo and Paolo stay by the entrance." Anaya nodded, gathering her professional demeanor around her like armor. The teen crisis hotline forwarded this case directly. These kids have nowhere else to go. The clinic's interior lights cast long shadows across the empty waiting room. Marta had already gone home, leaving only the night security guard who nodded respectfully, another of Mateo's additions. The familiar scent of lavender air freshener and clean floors welcomed her back. A girl huddled in one of the chairs, maybe 16, arms wrapped tight around herself. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. Anaya recognized the signs of someone at their breaking point. "I'm Dr. Pereira," she said softly, using the warm but professional tone that had soothed countless trauma survivors. "Would you like to come back to my office?" The session unfolded with the careful patience such cases required. Anaya kept one eye on the clock while creating a safe space for the girl's story to emerge. Physical abuse at home, nowhere to go, desperate for options. By minute 35, Anaya had arranged an emergency shelter placement and transportation through vetted channels. Outside her window, she caught glimpses of Renzo and Paolo maintaining their watch. Their presence felt less intrusive now, a reminder that her own crisis lurked beyond these walls. As she walked the teen to meet the shelter representative, she felt Mateo's eyes on her from the SUV. The drive back to the penthouse started in heavy silence. Naples' nightlife pulsed around them, couples strolling the waterfront, cafes spilling golden light onto cobblestones, fishing boats returning to harbor. Such normal scenes made the danger feel surreal. "Lila stole from us!" Matteo's words cut through the quiet, precise as a blade. 2 million euros transferred through shell accounts we tracked to Fiore territory. She was their plant, working under their orders. Anaya's chest tightened. She was my patient. She came for trauma counseling after escaping trafficking. The trafficking was real, so was the trauma, but she used your clinic as cover to access our accounts through one of our legitimate businesses. The Fiores knew targeting you would hurt me most. His hands flexed on the steering wheel. If you walk away from me, they'll use you to bleed me, slowly, publicly. The trap crystallized in Anaya's mind with brutal clarity. There was no safe outside anymore. Leaving meant death, if not hers, then the death of everything and everyone she'd built her life around. Staying meant belonging to Matteo's world until this threat ended. She watched the dark water of the bay slide past her window, remembering the teenage girl she'd just helped escape an impossible situation. Sometimes survival meant making impossible choices. "Then we end it," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of irrevocable change. Matteo nodded once, a sharp movement that acknowledged their agreement. Not submission, partnership in whatever came next. The SUV wound through narrow streets toward the penthouse. Anaya's mind raced through the implications of what she'd just committed to. Her clinic would need better security. Her patients would need protection protocols. She'd need combat training, situational awareness, everything she'd avoided learning after the fire. "The clinic stays open," she said firmly. "My patients need me more than ever." With enhanced security and proper protocols, Matteo countered. "You'll train with Renzo. Basic self-defense, weapons familiarization, no arguments. I need to understand your world better." Anaya turned to face him fully. "The politics, the players, the unwritten rules. I won't be helpless again." A ghost of approval flickered across his face. "We start tomorrow. Tonight you process, plan, prepare yourself for what's coming." The penthouse garage felt like entering a fortress. Layers of security scanning and checking their vehicle. Anaya's mind was already cataloging details she'd previously ignored. Camera positions, guard rotations, exit routes. This was her life now. In the elevator, Matteo's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. His expression darkened as he read it, but he waited until they reached the penthouse before speaking. "Our sources confirmed Lila's location," he said, watching her carefully. "She's alive, but deep in Fiore territory. Getting to her won't be simple." Anaya absorbed this, remembering the quiet woman who'd sat in her office just weeks ago, carrying such heavy secrets. "She left me something," she realized aloud. "An envelope. She said not to open it unless something happened to her." Matteo's attention sharpened. "Where?" "Hidden in my office files. I can retrieve it tomorrow." She met his gaze steadily. "Whatever's in it, we face it together. No more secrets between us." He nodded, then stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek in a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "Rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow we start, dismantling the Fiore Empire piece by piece." The moments stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then he stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place as he moved toward his office to make calls. Anaya watched him go, feeling the weight of their new agreement settle around her shoulders. She'd chosen this. Chosen him, chosen war, chosen to fight rather than hide. Tomorrow would bring violence and vengeance, but tonight she would prepare herself, strengthen her resolve, and remember why she'd survived that fire all those years ago. She had work to do. The evening air carried the scent of garlic and fresh bread from the restaurant when the first shot cracked through the darkness. Matteo moved with devastating speed, shoving Anaya down and behind the SUV's reinforced frame. Her cheek pressed against cold asphalt as more shots rang out, the sound deafening in the narrow street. Through the gap beneath the vehicle, Anaya watched boots moving with military precision. Renzo's stance was rock steady as he returned fire, his shots calculated and controlled. The motorcycle's front tire exploded, sending the bike into a skid. Metal screamed against pavement. Matteo's shoes appeared in her line of sight, moving with predatory grace. There was no hesitation in his advance toward the fallen shooter, no trace of the businessman who'd been discussing dinner preferences moments before. This was the other Matteo, the one who ruled Naples' underground with iron control. The crack of bone cut through the chaos, followed by a strangled scream as Matteo disarmed the gunman. Anaya pushed herself to her knees, her heart hammering against her ribs. The scene before her was like something from a crime drama, the motorcycle on its side, shell casings glinting on wet pavement, and Mateo standing over the shooter with cold efficiency. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. A sleek black car pulled up, and a well-dressed man stepped out. Mateo's fixer, she realized. He moved through the gathering crowd with practiced ease, producing permits and speaking to suddenly appearing witnesses, who would swear this was nothing more than a permitted security exercise. Mateo crouched beside the groaning shooter, his expression darkening as he examined something on the man's exposed shoulder. The tattoo there looked wrong somehow, like someone had tried to alter existing ink into a different design. Mateo's jaw tightened as he pocketed the man's phone, then gestured for his men to remove the shooter. Rival affiliated, was all he told Anaya as he helped her into the SUV, but she caught the tension in his voice, the way his eyes hardened when he looked at the tattoo again. He was holding something back. The drive to the penthouse passed in tense silence. Anaya's mind kept replaying the sounds of gunfire, the cold precision in Mateo's movements as he'd taken down the shooter. This wasn't her world of careful words and healing spaces. This was a world where violence erupted without warning, where survival depended on split-second reactions and lethal skill. In the penthouse's bright kitchen light, she noticed the blood on Mateo's sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, reaching for his arm. "A graze," he dismissed, but allowed her to roll up his sleeve. The bullet had scored a shallow path across his forearm, angry and red against his tan skin. Anaya's hands shook as she cleaned the wound with supplies from the first aid kit. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard, making every movement feel unsteady. She focused on the task, on the familiar routine of wound care, trying to ground herself in the present moment. "You did well," Mateo said softly, his voice gentler than she'd heard it all day. "Most people freeze their first time under fire. You followed instructions, stayed low, kept your head." She secured the bandage, her fingers lingering on his warm skin. "Is this what your life is always like? Violence waiting around every corner?" "Not always." His other hand covered hers, steadying her trembling fingers. "But often enough that I won't risk you alone tonight. You'll sleep in my room. It's the most secure in the penthouse." Anaya opened her mouth to protest, but the memory of gunfire was too fresh. She nodded instead. Mateo's bedroom was a study in masculine elegance. Dark woods, steel gray linens, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the bay. He insisted she take the oversized armchair by the window, bringing her a soft throw blanket that smelled faintly of his cologne. He stretched out on the leather sofa across the room, still fully dressed, except for his shoes. The city lights sparkled on the water outside, peaceful from this height, but Anaya couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard gunshots, saw Mateo advancing on the shooter with lethal grace. She watched his profile in the dim light, noting how he stared at the ceiling, equally awake. Questions burned in her mind. Why had the shooter's tattoo troubled him so much? What wasn't he telling her about the attack? But she held them back, understanding that some answers would have to wait until he was ready to give them. The night stretched on, marked by the soft sound of their breathing and the distant hum of the city below. Neither of them slept, both lost in thoughts of what this escalation meant, what tomorrow might bring. The attack had shattered any illusion that this was a simple matter of protection. They were at war now, whether they wanted it or not. In the darkness, Anaya found herself studying the man across the room, the hard lines of his profile, the tension in his shoulders even at rest. He'd saved her life twice now, first from the fire and again tonight. Yet she sensed that the greatest dangers still lay ahead, hidden in whatever truth he'd read in that altered tattoo. The city's lights painted patterns across the ceiling as boats moved through the harbor below. Somewhere out there, enemies were moving in the darkness, plotting their next move. But here in this room, in this moment of shared sleeplessness, Anaya felt strangely safe. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. Hours ticked by in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but drawing comfort from the other's presence. The night felt like a pause between chapters, the calm before whatever storm was gathering on their horizon. Dawn painted the Bay of Naples in watercolor hues as Anaya stepped onto the penthouse terrace. The morning air held a bite that made her grateful for the fitted workout gear Mateo had provided. He was already there, dressed in black training clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders. "First rule," Mateo said without preamble, "awareness keeps you alive." He moved behind her, maintaining a careful distance. "May I adjust your stance?" Anaya nodded, appreciating his request. His hands were warm through her clothes as he positioned her shoulders, teaching her to maintain peripheral vision while appearing casual. Her skin tingled where he touched, but his movement stayed purely professional. Watch reflections in windows, he instructed. Count exits. Notice who changes pace when you do. Each lesson came with practical demonstrations, Mateo showing her how to spot someone mirroring her movements or looping past too often. The knife training made her nervous, but Mateo produced a small blade that fit her palm perfectly. This isn't about fighting, he explained. It's about creating space to run. He requested permission before each contact, showing her how to grip and break away. Despite the serious subject, Anaya found herself relaxing into the routine. Mateo was a patient teacher, his usual intensity channeled into clear instruction. When she successfully spotted him shadowing her across the terrace, his quick smile of approval sent warmth through her chest. Good, he said. Again. They worked until the sun climbed higher, Anaya's confidence growing with each successful identification of potential threats. After training, showered, and changed, Anaya approached Mateo in his office. I need to call 2 Monday patients, she said. They're complex cases. Better to move them remote than cancel. Mateo nodded, already texting his IT team. Gia will boost the connection. Make your calls. Anaya handled the scheduling changes efficiently, maintaining her professional calm while explaining the shift to telehealth. Throughout both calls, she felt Mateo's presence in the doorway, watching but never interrupting. The midday sun blazed outside when Gia arrived, her tablet tucked under one arm, and an enormous coffee in her other hand. She settled at Mateo's desk with casual familiarity, pulling up data streams. Our shooter's phone is chatty, Gia reported, her fingers flying across the screen. Calls to 2 numbers stand out. One belongs to Luca. She glanced at Mateo, whose face remained impassive. The other's a burner, traced to a Fiore cousin. Marco, the expendable one. Anaya watched Mateo absorb this information, noting how his jaw tightened. The names meant little to her, but she recognized the tension radiating from him. Whatever Gia had found troubled him deeply, though he said nothing. As evening approached, Anaya gravitated to the kitchen. Cooking had always centered her, and after the intensity of training, she craved the familiar routine. She found the pantry stocked with everything needed for her grandmother's lentil stew. The kitchen filled with aromatic spices as she worked. Guards and staff drifted in, drawn by the scents of cumin and cardamom. Anaya set them to tasks, chopping onions, kneading dough for the buns, transforming Mateo's security team into sous chefs. These dangerous men, who hours ago had prowled the perimeter with weapons ready, now stood at her counter carefully shaping dough. She caught snippets of their conversations, stories of mother's cooking and childhood favorites. The kitchen, her domain, became a bridge between their world and hers. Mateo appeared as she was setting out dishes, leaning in the doorway to observe. The scene before him was unexpected. His security team arranged around Anaya like satellites, following her gentle directions with the same precision they gave his orders. But where they obeyed him from necessity and fear, they moved for her out of genuine warmth. She distributed the fragrant stew and fresh buns with easy grace, ensuring everyone had enough. When she finally settled with her own plate, Mateo moved to her side. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and certain. Eat with me, he said softly. Anaya joined him at the head of the table, aware of how natural it felt to share this space with him. The meal passed in comfortable conversation, the tension of their circumstances temporarily eased by good food and better company. More than the training that morning, this moment revealed something crucial about survival. Mateo commanded through power and fear, but Anaya built connections through caring and shared comfort. His security team would die for him out of duty. They would protect her because she made them feel human. As they ate, Anaya noticed Mateo watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with security. His eyes tracked her movements as she passed bread, noted how she drew out quiet guards with gentle questions, observed how naturally she fit into this dangerous world while somehow softening its edges. The cardamom buns disappeared quickly, claimed by appreciative hands. Even the most hardened guards seemed to relax under the spell of home cooking and easy conversation. Anaya moved through it all with grace, her earlier training sessions' lessons visible in how she maintained awareness of the room while staying engaged with each interaction. Mateo remained close throughout the meal, his presence both protective and possessive. When their hands brushed, reaching for the same dish, neither pulled away immediately. The attraction that had simmered during training resurfaced in these small moments. Shared glances, brief touches, the way they oriented toward each other without conscious thought. The evening settled into a rhythm of quiet conversation and comfortable silences. Outside, the sun set over the bay, painting the water in shades of gold and purple. Inside, in this kitchen filled with the scents of spices and fresh bread, they had created a moment of peace in the midst of gathering storms. The kitchen staff had cleared out, leaving behind only the lingering scents of cardamom and curry. Anaya found herself drawn to the balcony, where the lights of Naples twinkled below like earthbound stars. The evening air carried a hint of salt from the bay, cooling her skin after the warmth of the kitchen. Matteo joined her, 2 glasses of water in hand. He passed one to her, their fingers brushing in a way that felt deliberate. The silence between them held weight, filled with unspoken tensions and desires that had been building since that first night in his office. "I should thank you," Anaya said, turning to face him, "for today's training, for the protection." She paused, gathering her courage. "But I won't thank you for making me feel things I probably shouldn't." Matteo's eyes darkened. "Shouldn't? The situation is complicated enough without adding attraction to the mix." She gestured between them. "And I refuse to feel ashamed for wanting you. I'm an adult who knows her own mind." His breath caught audibly. "Wanting me could get you killed." "I'm already in danger," she countered. "That's not about want, that's about circumstances. This," she stepped closer, "this is different." Matteo's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. "I want you more than is wise," he admitted. "More than I should, given everything." Then stop thinking about should. The first kiss was gentle, a question asked and answered. Matteo's lips brushed hers with careful restraint, waiting for her response. Anaya pressed closer, one hand sliding up his chest to rest over his heartbeat. "Yes," he murmured against her mouth. "Yes," she breathed back. The next kiss deepened, but remained controlled. Matteo's hands stayed respectfully at her waist and face, even as Anaya's fingers threaded through his hair. Each touch was preceded by a quiet request, each escalation marked by mutual consent. When Anaya gasped softly, Matteo pulled back slightly. Their foreheads rested together, breathing synchronized in the quiet night air. The city hummed below, oblivious to this moment of tenderness between them. "We should slow down," Matteo said, though his hands tightened briefly at her waist. Anaya nodded, understanding. "It feels too important to rush." He stepped back, creating space between them while maintaining their connection, with one hand still at her waist. From his pocket, he withdrew a sleek black keycard. "This is programmed to your thumbprint," he explained, placing it in her palm. "It gives you access to the private elevator and all secure areas of the penthouse. You're not a prisoner here." The weight of the card in her hand felt symbolic. "Thank you, but I have conditions." His eyebrow raised, but he nodded for her to continue. "You don't give orders about my body or my work," she stated firmly. "I'll accept security protocols, but my autonomy in those areas is non-negotiable." Matteo considered this, his expression serious. "Your safety comes first," he said finally. "But within those parameters, I agree." They shook hands formally, the gesture almost amusing given their earlier kisses. Yet it felt right. Establishing boundaries, making agreements as equals despite the power imbalance of their situation. "I should get some sleep," Anaya said, stepping toward the balcony doors. "In my own suite tonight, if that's acceptable." "The security system is fully armed," Matteo agreed. "You'll be safe there." She paused at the threshold. "Good night, Matteo." "Sleep well, Cara." Anaya walked to her suite, conscious of his gaze following her movement. Inside, she found her bed turned down, fresh flowers on the nightstand, small touches that spoke of care rather than control. She changed into soft pajamas and slipped between the sheets, her lips still tingling from their kisses. Matteo remained in his office long after Anaya retired. The tablet before him displayed Gia's findings, call logs, timestamps, location data. Luca's number appeared too many times to be coincidence. Tied to both attacks through careful analysis of cell tower pings and timing. His trusted advisor, the man who'd helped him build his empire, now implicated in attempts on Anaya's life. The betrayal sat like acid in his stomach. 20 years of loyalty apparently worth nothing. He picked up his phone, composing a message to Renzo. "Shadow Luca at dawn. Quiet. Report only to me." The reply came instantly. "Understood, boss." Matteo set the phone down and leaned back in his chair. Through the open door, he could see the balcony where he'd kissed Anaya. The memory of her warmth, her honesty, her strength in setting boundaries. It all stood in sharp contrast to the cold evidence of treachery before him. In the quiet of the penthouse, two very different scenes played out. In her suite, Anaya drifted to sleep, safe and certain in her choices. In his office, Matteo stared at proof of betrayal, the taste of cardamom and kisses giving way to the bitter knowledge that someone he trusted wanted to destroy everything he held dear. The night settled around them both, the bay waters reflecting moonlight, the city's pulse slowing to a gentle rhythm. Security cameras blinked steadily, guards patrolled with quiet efficiency. And somewhere in Naples, Luca slept unaware that his careful plans were already unraveling. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows as Anaya settled into your makeshift counseling space. She adjusted her webcam, checking that the background looked appropriately professional. Her client, Maria, was scheduled in 5 minutes, a young woman rescued from trafficking who needed steady support while building a new life. Matteo took his position just outside the door, close enough to guard, but far enough to maintain confidentiality. He'd arranged the space perfectly, soundproofing, encrypted connections, and a clear sightline to all entry points. When Maria's face appeared on screen, Anaya leaned forward with warm attention. For the next hour, her voice remained steady and gentle, creating a safe space even through digital distance. Matteo couldn't hear the content, but the cadence of Anaya's responses told its own story. Compassion, strength, and unwavering support. After the session ended, Anaya found Matteo still waiting, his broad shoulders against the wall. Something in her expression must have shown her emotional fatigue, because he gestured to the balcony. Fresh air? They stood together at the railing, watching boats dot the bay below. The morning breeze carried salt and coffee scents from nearby cafes. The night of the fire, Matteo said suddenly, his voice rough. I lost more than a building. Marco raised me from age 7. He was the closest thing to a father I'd ever known. Anaya turned to face him, seeing the raw edge of old pain in his eyes. The Fiore family, he continued. They claimed territory disputes, but lighting that match, they took my mentor, my guide. Marco taught me everything, honor, strategy, how to lead without becoming a monster. His hands gripped the railing. I've spent 20 years believing they orchestrated it all. I'm so sorry, Anaya said softly. She understood loss, the way it carved hollow spaces that never quite filled. Your turn, he said, gentler now. Tell me your scars. Anaya breathed deep, tasting salt air. Survivor's guilt, at first. Why me, when others didn't make it out? Then years of grinding through school on scholarships, working 3 jobs, while the world tried to make me smaller. Literally and figuratively, she gestured to her curves. But I refused to shrink. Built my practice instead, learned to help others heal. Matteo's hand found hers on the railing. You never made yourself small. It's what I noticed first, watching you work. You fill rooms with strength, not fear. He touched his side, where the old scar lay hidden under his shirt. Without words, he lifted the fabric, letting her see the jagged mark that had saved her life 20 years ago. Anaya traced it with gentle fingers, feeling him breathe steady under her touch. Their eyes met, held. This time when they kissed, it wasn't careful exploration, but mutual choice. Anaya pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of him. Matteo's hands spanned her waist, respectful but certain. My room, he murmured against her lips. Yes, she breathed. Back? The bedroom was flooded with morning light. They took their time undressing each other, each touch an affirmation. Matteo kissed every curve, every stretch mark, worshipping rather than merely accepting. Anaya explored the map of scars across his skin, learning the story of survival written there. Protection? She asked when passion built to urgency. Nightstand, he answered, reaching for the drawer. What followed was heat and tenderness, braided together. Matteo moved with controlled power, watching her responses, adjusting to every gasp and sigh. Anaya met him as an equal, taking pleasure in giving it back in equal measure. When release claimed them both, it was with names spoken like prayers. Afterward, Matteo didn't simply roll away. He brought water, soft cloths for cleanup, even fruit from the kitchen. They shared orange segments and lazy kisses, talking about nothing and everything. You good? He asked, brushing hair from her face. Very, she smiled. You? Better than good. His thumb traced her cheek. Stay? She curled closer, sleep already tugging. Wake me if anything changes. Always, he promised. They drifted off tangled together, her head on his chest, his arm protective around her waist. The penthouse security system hummed quietly, cameras and motion sensors alert. Somewhere in the city, Renzo continued his careful surveillance of Luca, gathering evidence piece by piece. But in that sun-warmed bedroom, there was only peace. Anaya's breath evened out in sleep, Mateo following soon after. They'd both chosen this. Not just the physical intimacy, but the vulnerability of letting someone past carefully built walls. The morning stretched toward afternoon, sunlight shifting across rumpled sheets. Neither stirred when a boat horn sounded in the distance or when guards changed shifts in the hallway. They'd found safe harbor in each other's arms, if only for these precious hours. Mateo woke briefly when his phone buzzed with a check-in from Renzo. He read the message one-handed, his other arm still cradling Anaya. Nothing urgent, just confirmation that surveillance continued as planned. He set the phone aside, turning back to the warmth of her. Anaya shifted closer in her sleep, seeking his heat. Even unconscious, she trusted him to keep her safe. The weight of that trust settled in his chest, precious and terrifying at once. He'd earned it not through force or fear, but through respect and choice. He dozed again, lulled by her steady breathing. The penthouse remained secure, guards alert at every access point. But here in this room, weapons and warnings fell away. There was only this: the sound of waves below, the warmth of tangled limbs, and the quiet certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. They slept on, finding rest in each other's presence. Outside, Naples continued its Sunday rhythms: church bells, cafe chatter, boats crossing the bay. Inside, two people who'd learned to expect danger allowed themselves to dream of peace. Monday morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Anaya stretched in bed, the sheets still warm from where Mateo had risen minutes earlier. The smell of fresh coffee drew her to the kitchen, where she found him already dressed in a charcoal suit, checking messages on his tablet. "Morning," he said, sliding a steaming cup toward her. The domesticity of the moment struck her. How natural it felt to share this quiet space. Anaya settled at the breakfast island, opening her phone to handle the clinic's monthly expenses. Her finger hovered over the banking app, and she frowned. Something caught her attention, a pattern she'd never noticed before. Years of anonymous donations threaded through her accounts like breadcrumbs. Small at first, during her university years, then larger sums supporting her clinic's startup costs. Each traced back through a maze of shell companies, but now she recognized the pattern in the account numbers. Vitale Holdings. "You funded my scholarships," she said quietly, looking up at Mateo. It wasn't a question. "And the clinic." He set down his coffee, meeting her gaze steadily. "Yes." "For how long?" "Since the fire." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "I made sure you had what you needed to build the life you wanted." Anger flared in her chest, hot and sharp. "You had no right to make those decisions for me, to manipulate my life from the shadows." "I never directed your choices," Mateo countered. "The money only ensured you had options." "Options you selected?" Anaya stood, pacing the kitchen. "Do you know how hard I worked? How proud I was of doing it on my own?" Her voice cracked. "Except I wasn't on my own, was I? You were pulling strings the whole time." Mateo rounded the island, keeping space between them but facing her directly. "I watched you work 3 jobs while studying. Saw you skip meals to afford textbooks. The money changed nothing about your dedication or achievements." "It changed everything about my agency," Anaya shot back. "You decided I needed help without asking, played guardian angel without consent." "You're right." His admission stopped her pacing. "I should have been transparent. From this moment forward, all choices are yours. No more secret support." Anaya studied him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the counter's edge. Behind the controlled exterior, she saw something raw, devotion tangled with regret. "You really watched over me all those years?" she asked softly. "From a distance, never interfering beyond the financial support." He paused. "I couldn't stay away entirely, not after failing to protect you in the fire." Understanding dawned. "You weren't responsible for that fire, Mateo." "No, but I was responsible for keeping you safe afterward." He reached for his tablet. "Let's make it official, a contract of boundaries." Together they drafted terms: financial support only when explicitly requested, complete transparency about any decisions affecting her life or work, regular check-ins about security without overstepping personal autonomy. Anaya added her own clause: "My clinic remains independent, no Vitale influence on patient care or policies." "Agreed." Mateo's finger traced the screen. "Though I reserve the right to ensure proper security measures." "Within reason," she countered, "and with my input." They were still discussing details when Mateo's phone rang. His expression shifted as he listened, eyes finding Anaya's across the kitchen. "The police found Lila's bag," he said after hanging up. "Near the docks. There's a sealed envelope inside addressed to you." Anaya's heart jumped. "When?" "This morning. Early patrol spotted it." He was already messaging his security team. "We'll go together." "No arguments here," Anaya said, heading to change clothes. The weight of the morning's revelations settled into something manageable, not forgotten, but understood in a new light. In their bedroom, she pulled on dark jeans and a sweater, watching Mateo check his weapon before sliding it into his shoulder holster. The gesture was smooth, practiced, a reminder of the dangers still circling their lives. "About this morning," she said, touching his arm. "I'm still processing the funding situation, but I understand why you did it." Mateo turned, cupping her face in his hands. "You never needed my protection to succeed. I just couldn't bear watching you struggle when I had the means to help." "Next time, ask first," she murmured, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. "I'm not good at being managed." "Noted." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Ready?" The SUV waited in the private garage, Renzo already at the wheel. Anaya settled into the back seat beside Mateo, their thighs touching. The contact anchored her as they wound through Naples' morning traffic toward the port. She watched the city scroll past, thinking about the years Mateo had observed her life from afar. All those anonymous deposits that had seemed like strokes of luck, scholarship top-ups when her funds ran low, equipment grants for the clinic, rental assistance during lean months. Part of her still bristled at the intervention, the assumption of need without discussion. But another part recognized the care behind those actions, the dedication of a man who'd saved her life once and kept finding ways to protect it. "You're thinking too loud," Mateo said quietly. "Just realizing how many times you've caught me when I was falling," she replied. "Even when I didn't know it was you." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You never fell. You just needed solid ground to stand on." The harbor came into view, morning sun glinting off the water. Police tape marked off a section of the wharf where Lila's bag had been found. Anaya squeezed Mateo's hand once before straightening her shoulders. Whatever waited in that envelope, they would face it together. Not as protector and protected, but as equals who'd chosen to stand side by side. The fluorescent lights of the evidence room buzzed overhead as Anaya sat at the metal table, her heart pounding. The police officer and Mateo's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Sophia, watched as she carefully opened the envelope with gloved hands. 2 papers slid out. The first, a clinical document with bold letterhead, made her breath catch. DNA paternity test results. Her eyes skimmed down to the conclusion, 99.99% probability match to Aurelio Fiore. The second paper was handwritten, tear-stained in places. Lila's familiar scrawl filled the page. "Anaya, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to touch you. The money I took, it wasn't just for me. I found out who you really were, what they did to your mother. I thought if I got enough cash, we could both disappear before they realized you existed. But they caught me. Don't trust anyone except Mateo. The fire 20 years ago. It wasn't what everyone thinks. Look deeper. Stay safe. Lila." The room tilted sideways. Anaya gripped the table edge, her knuckles white. She was Aurelio Fiore's daughter. The head of the family, Mateo blamed for killing his mentor. The truth she'd never known about herself sat in black and white, shattering everything. She felt Mateo's hand press against her lower back, steady and warm. When she dared look at him, his face was carefully blank, but his touch never wavered. "We'll need copies for our records," Sophia said smoothly, addressing the officer. "The originals can stay in evidence." The bureaucratic process blurred past, signing forms, initialing photocopies, watching the documents being carefully resealed. Anaya moved through it like walking underwater, Mateo's hand guiding her. In the SUV, she stared at her copy of the test results. The clinical language seemed surreal. Maternal DNA confirmed, paternal match established, genetic markers consistent with Mediterranean ancestry. "I don't even know my mother's name," she whispered. "All these years, I thought I was alone." Mateo's fingers threaded through hers. "You're not alone now." The drive back to the penthouse passed in silence. Anaya's mind raced with questions. Had her mother known the Fiores? Had she hidden her pregnancy? Was the fire connected to her heritage? Inside the elevator, Mateo pulled her close, letting her bury her face in his chest. She breathed in his familiar scent, sandalwood and clean cotton, trying to ground herself. The penthouse was quiet when they entered, afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Anaya moved to the couch on shaky legs, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "You're exactly who you've always been," Mateo said firmly, sitting beside her. "A healer, a fighter, a woman who refuses to let fear win." The tears came then, hot and fast. 20 years of wondering about her parents, of building herself, from nothing, crashed over her. Mateo gathered her into his arms, letting her sob against his shoulder. "What if I'm just like them?" she choked out. "What if violence is in my blood? Look at me." Mateo cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears. "You are you, not a last name, not someone else's choices. The woman who spends her life helping others heal, that's who you are. But your mentor, the fire, was a long time ago, and nothing about you changes how I feel." His voice roughened. "You've earned every piece of who you are. No DNA test can touch that." Anaya's phone buzzed. A text from Marta about tomorrow's schedule. The normalcy of it almost made her laugh. The world kept turning, even when everything changed. She got up to splash cold water on her face, studying herself in the bathroom mirror. The same brown eyes looked back at her. The same curves she'd learned to love. The same strength in her shoulders from years of carrying others' burdens. When she returned, Mateo was reading a message on his phone, tension in his jaw. "Renzo just spotted Luca meeting a Fiore courier at the old cannery near the industrial port," he said. "Private meeting, no guards." "You think he's been playing both sides?" "The timing's too perfect. The altered tattoo on the shooter, now this." Mateo's eyes were hard. "We wait until dawn. Move with proof, not rage." Anaya sank back onto the couch, processing. "Why dawn?" "Better visibility, less civilian traffic, and Luca's always sloppier in the morning." He sat beside her. "But that's tomorrow's problem." She leaned into him, emotionally drained. "I need to bake something. It helps me think." "Kitchen's yours." He kissed her temple. "I'll have Gia start digging into hospital records from your birth year. See what we can find about your mother." In the kitchen, Anaya lost herself in the familiar motions of measuring flour, warming milk, kneading dough. The repetitive work soothed her racing thoughts. Her whole life, she'd defined herself by what she'd built, her education, her practice, her chosen family of friends and patients. Learning she was a Fiore didn't erase any of that. Through the kitchen doorway, she could see Mateo, on his phone, coordinating tomorrow's operation. The man who'd saved her life, who'd loved her from afar, who now faced an impossible tangle of loyalty and revenge. But they had tonight. Tomorrow would come with its own battles, but right now she could find comfort in the simple act of creating something good with her hands. The dough rose under her fingers as the afternoon light softened to gold, and for a moment she felt almost at peace. Dawn crept over Naples' industrial district, painting the abandoned cannery in weak gray light. Gia's surveillance drone hummed quietly above, its camera focused on the meeting below. From their position in an unmarked van, she manipulated the controls with practiced precision while Mateo and Renzo watched the feed. "Audio's coming through clear," Gia whispered, adjusting her headset. "Courier's arriving now." Through the drone's camera, they watched Luca emerge from his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. The Fiore courier, young, nervous, approached from the shadows. The exchange was quick. Cash for documents. "Turning up volume," Gia murmured, fingers dancing across her tablet. Luca's voice crackled through the speakers. "Keeping Mateo at war is profitable for everyone. The Fioris get their distraction, we get our cut, and that fool keeps throwing money at security instead of expansion." Mateo's knuckles whitened on the van's console. Beside him, Renzo checked his weapon. "The girl?" the courier asked. "Insurance," Luca laughed. "Though I didn't expect her to be actual Fiore blood, that's a bonus." A glint of sunlight reflected off the drone's lens. Luca's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "He made us," Gia hissed. "Feed still good, though." "Move in," Mateo ordered, but Luca was already sprinting for his car. Renzo's team emerged from cover, but Luca's Mercedes roared to life, tires screaming as it fishtailed onto the main road. The courier vanished into the maze of containers. Mateo's phone buzzed, the penthouse's silent alarm. His blood went cold. "Multiple hostiles at the service entrance," Gia reported, switching feeds. "Anaya's in the clinic office with Pietro and Marco." Through the security cameras, they watched Anaya directing the junior guards to barricade the door. Her movements were calm, practiced, exactly as they'd trained. She reached for the panic button under the desk, triggering the building's lockdown protocols. The power cut. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. Smoke began seeping under the door. "Switching to thermal," Gia said, typing furiously. 4 hostiles on that floor, more coming up the service stairs. Anaya's voice came through Mateo's encrypted channel. "I'm safe for now and moving to the north stair." Her tone was steady, clinical, the same voice she used to talk down crisis patients. Following evacuation protocol, Mateo gripped the dashboard. "How long to get back?" 15 minutes minimum, Renzo said, already driving. "Traffic's heavy." On the feeds, they watched Anaya and the guards emerge from the office, moving in formation toward the stairwell. Pietro took point, Marco covering their rear. They made it down 3 floors before the attack came. The thermal feed showed Luca's heat signature emerging from a maintenance door on the 15th floor. The guards went down first, convulsing from taser hits. Anaya managed to land 1 solid strike, just as they'd practiced, before Luca caught her arm. "Signal's dead," Gia reported, fingers flying. "They're in the building's blind spot." Mateo's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. "Find them!" The next 4 hours were hell. Every traffic camera, every CCTV feed, every dock security system, nothing. Luca had vanished with Anaya into Naples' maze of warehouses and shipping containers. At exactly noon, Mateo's phone chimed, a video link. The warehouse was vast, industrial. Anaya sat zip-tied to a metal chair, chin raised defiantly despite the split lip and disheveled hair. A tablet propped in front of her displayed news headlines about the Fiore family. Luca's voice came off camera. "She's quite composed for someone about to become headline news. Imagine the scandal, the lost Fiore heir, seducing the Vitale boss while working for both sides. Your empire would crumble overnight." "You engineered all of it," Anaya said coldly. "The fire 20 years ago, keeping the families at war, using Lila to plant evidence." "Clever girl," Luca stepped into frame. "But not clever enough to save yourself. Now, Mateo, let's discuss terms. Come alone at midnight. The usual spot by Pier 47, or tomorrow's papers get quite the story." The video cut out. In the command center they'd established, Gia was already tracing the signal while Renzo coordinated search teams. Mateo's expression could have frozen hell. "Lock down every exit from this city. No one leaves by road, rail, or water without our eyes on them. I want every warehouse near Pier 47 mapped, every security camera, every approach route." "What about the Fiores?" Renzo asked quietly. "They're being played too." Mateo's voice was arctic. "Gia, send them everything we have on Luca. Let them see how long he's been profiting from both sides." His phone buzzed again, a text from Luca with a photo. Anaya, still defiant, holding today's newspaper. The message read, "TikTok." Mateo didn't slam his fist into the wall, but it was a near thing. The control that made him legendary in Naples' underworld held, but barely. Every instinct screamed to hunt Luca down immediately, but that would get Anaya killed. "Sir," Gia called, "I've got something. The warehouse's power grid shows a spike consistent with industrial refrigeration." "The old fish processing plants," Renzo said. "There's 3 near Pier 47. Mateo nodded once, fury contained behind steel control. "Map them, but don't move yet. Luca will have watchers. One wrong step and—" He cut himself off. The command center hummed with activity as the sun climbed higher. Naples held its breath, every criminal enterprise aware that the city was locked down tight. No one moved without Vitale eyes on them. And in a warehouse by the docks, Anaya waited, meeting her captor's gaze with the same steady strength she'd shown that first night in Mateo's office. The same strength that had drawn him like a moth to flame. The afternoon sun beat down on Naples' port district as Mateo's network hummed with controlled chaos. In the command center, screens displayed real-time feeds from every angle of the docks. Gia's fingers flew across multiple keyboards, her usual wit subdued by concentration. "Grid pattern established," she reported. 3 refrigerated warehouses identified within range of piers. 47 power signatures show 2 active. Mateo studied the thermal imaging. "The southern complex has the most guard rotation patterns. Focus there." Renzo entered with a tablet. "Sir, the Fiore underboss wants to talk." "Put him through!" Mateo's voice remained glacial, controlled. The video call connected. An older man with steel gray hair appeared. "Vitale, we received your intel on Luca. 20 years of playing both sides. He lit the match that night, Matteo said. The fire that killed my mentor, and nearly killed your heir, though none of us knew it then. The underboss's expression hardened. Anaya Pereira. We've verified the DNA. Aurelio's daughter, hidden all these years, and now Luca uses her as bait. She is not bait, Matteo cut in. She is a woman who built her own life, who helps others heal. Your blood, yes, but her own person first. Meanwhile, in the warehouse's dank interior, Anaya worked methodically against her restraints. The tiny blade, barely larger than her palm, pressed against the rope with each subtle movement. Matteo's training echoed in her mind. Patience over force, precision over speed. The guard by the door yawned, head nodding. Luca had left an hour ago to prepare the stage at Pier 47. Anaya kept her breathing steady, movements minimal. The rope began to fray. When it finally gave, she held position, waiting for the perfect moment. The guard's chin dropped to his chest. She slipped free, silent as smoke. A wooden crate sat nearby, its surface soft with age. Using the blade's tip, she carved quick, precise coordinates, the warehouse's exact location based on the shipping manifest she'd glimpsed earlier. The wood splintered easily. She palmed a piece just as the guard stirred. Moving to inspect a leaking pipe near the loading ramp, she let the splinter fall where the water would carry it outward. Matteo would check drainage points first. He'd trained her to think like him. Hey, the guard spotted her. Back to the chair. Anaya raised her hand slowly. I need to use the bathroom, and I want to record a message for Matteo. The guard hesitated. She pressed on. Luca wants him rattled, right? Let me help. I'll tell him to stand down. Minutes later, Luca returned to find her back in the chair, a phone pointed at her face. Matteo, she began, voice trembling perfectly. Please don't come tonight. I can't find my keycard, and I can't watch you die for me. Luca smiled, pleased with her apparent breakdown. He didn't know that can't find my keycard was their danger phrase, chosen during training. Matteo would know she was conscious, capable, and had left him a sign. Back in the command center, Gia's system pinged. Boss, runoff camera 4 picked up something, wood fragment with numbers carved in it. Matteo leaned in, studying the image. His eyes narrowed. Cross-reference with the grid. Matching. Got it. Southern warehouse, east quarter. Consistent with our thermal readings. The pieces aligned. Guard patterns, power usage, the carved coordinates. At 11:45 p.m., Gia's finger hovered over the broadcast button. Drone footage ready to stream to all neutral families. Matteo nodded. Send it. Let them see Luca's true face. He pulled out an old ring, plain gold, worn smooth. The ring his mentor had given him the day he joined the family. He'd never worn it, keeping it instead as a reminder of debts and promises. Looking at the security feeds at the warehouse where Anaya waited, he spoke into his comm. You were never my debt. You are my life. The ring went back into his pocket as he checked his weapons. Around him, teams moved with practiced precision, taking positions throughout the dock district. Gia's screens showed thermal signatures shifting, pieces aligning on the board. In the warehouse, Anaya felt the weight of the small blade against her skin. She'd managed to hide it during the guard's search, using techniques Matteo had drilled into her. Now she waited, counting minutes, knowing that across the city, pieces were moving. Luca paced, checking his phone obsessively. His careful plans were unraveling. The neutral families would soon see the truth, and his power play would collapse. But he still had one card to play, the woman who had unknowingly carried Fiore blood for decades. The warehouse creaked, metal contracting in the cooling night air. Water dripped steadily from the leaking pipe, each drop marking another second closer to midnight. In the command center, Matteo's teams reported ready status, their voices tight with anticipation. 11:50 p.m. came with the soft ping of Gia's system confirming the carved coordinates. Matteo moved toward the door, his steps measured, controlled. Behind him, screens flickered with thermal images, security feeds, and the waiting broadcast that would expose Luca's decades of manipulation. The night air carried the scent of salt and diesel as Matteo emerged. Around the warehouse district, his men held position, waiting for his signal. Above, clouds scudded across a moonless sky, perfect for the work ahead. Thunder rolled across Naples port as Wednesday crept past midnight. Storm clouds hung low and heavy, perfect cover for the operation unfolding in the warehouse district. Thermal cameras tracked movement through the walls. 14 hostiles, 1 principal target, and 1 protectee. Matteo adjusted his earpiece, Gia's voice coming through clear. Teams in position, east and west approaches secured. He gave the signal. 2 strike teams moved like shadows, taking out perimeter guards with suppressors and hand-to-hand takedowns. The sound of distant gunfire echoed off metal walls. Inside the main warehouse, Anaya's head snapped up at the first crack of gunshots. Her guard shifted nervously, checking his phone. She measured distance, timing, angles, just as Matteo had taught her. When the guard stepped closer, she drove her head back, connecting with his nose. Bone. Crunched. She bolted, weaving between stacked pallets toward the north exit, remembering Matteo's lessons about using cover. Her heart thundered against her ribs, but her movement stayed controlled. "Stop!" Luca's voice cracked like a whip. His hand caught her arm, yanking her back with bruising force. "You're not going anywhere, little Fiore." The main door groaned open. Matteo stood framed in the entrance, stance relaxed but lethal. His eyes took in everything. Luca's grip on Anaya, the blood on her guard's face, the distance to potential weapons. "Let her go, Luca," Matteo's voice carried across the warehouse. "It's over." "Over?" Luca laughed, high and sharp. "I've spent 20 years building this. You think I'll just walk away?" 20 years, Matteo agreed. "Since you arranged the fire that killed my mentor. Since you started playing both sides, keeping us at war." Luca's grip tightened on Anaya. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" Matteo slowly lowered his gun, letting it hang loose in his fingers. "Why else would you be so desperate?" The moment Luca's attention shifted to the gun, Matteo moved. The blade appeared in his hand like magic, slashing upward. Luca howled as tendons severed in his weapon hand. The gun clattered to the concrete. Outside, shots cracked in rapid succession. Renzo's team methodically eliminated the remaining guards, their movements precise and coordinated. Through the windows, muzzle flashes lit up the storm clouds. Anaya twisted free of Luca's weakened grip. Her hand found a burner phone dropped in the chaos. With steady fingers, she accessed the closed syndicate network, the secure channel where families aired grievances and settled scores. "My name is Anaya Pereira," she spoke clearly into the camera. "Tonight, you're watching Luca Rossi's final manipulation fail." She turned the phone to where Gia's drone footage played on a nearby screen, showing Luca's meetings, his altered tattoos, his careful orchestration of violence. Her voice remained strong. "He arranged the fire 20 years ago that killed Matteo's mentor. He spent 2 decades stoking war between families. Tonight he kidnapped me to maintain that lie." Across the city, phones buzzed in powerful hands. The Fiore family watched their supposed enemies exposed as pawns in Luca's game. Their lieutenants stood down, refusing to be framed again. Luca lunged for Anaya, desperate to stop the broadcast. Matteo's hand caught his throat, slamming him to his knees. "The old world is dead, Luca." Matteo's voice carried clearly on the stream. "You killed it with your games." The single gunshot echoed through the warehouse. Luca's body crumpled, a neat hole between his eyes. Matteo crossed the space in 3 strides, hauling Anaya against his chest. She felt his breath shake, his heart hammering against her cheek, his arms wrapped around her like steel bands, protective and possessive. Looking directly into the still streaming phone, he spoke with quiet authority. "She is mine. Touch her, and you answer to me." The syndicate network erupted with messages. Decades of manufactured conflict collapsed in minutes as families processed the truth. Outside, the storm broke, rain hammering against the warehouse roof. Renzo appeared in the doorway, weapon lowered. "Building secure, boss. Medical team standing by." Anaya pressed closer to Matteo's chest, feeling the tension slowly unwind from his muscles. His hand cupped the back of her head, fingers gentle despite the blood on them. "Let's go home," he murmured against her hair. The warehouse district slowly quieted as teams swept the area. Matteo kept Anaya tucked against his side as they walked to the waiting SUV, his body angled to shield her from the rain. Behind them, cleanup crews moved with practiced efficiency, erasing evidence of the night's violence. In the back of the vehicle, Anaya finally allowed herself to shake. Matteo pulled her into his lap, his arms creating a fortress around her. She pressed her face into his neck, breathing in gunpowder and rain and the familiar scent of his skin. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. His arms tightened. "Always." Through the tinted windows, lightning illuminated the port. The storm that had covered their assault now washed the city clean, sweeping away old blood and older lies. In offices and safe houses across Naples, Powerful people watched their phones, processing the new reality Luca's death had created. Gia's voice came through the car's speaker. Live stream terminated. Cleanup crews report all clear. Do you want me to monitor syndicate chatter? Yes, Matteo replied. Flag any unusual movement. He kept one hand on Anaya's back, her heartbeat steady against his palm. The other hand touched his pocket, feeling the smooth shape of his mentor's ring, a reminder of promises kept and debts finally paid. The SUV moved smoothly through empty streets, wipers pushing away the rain. Behind them, the warehouse district faded into darkness, taking with it 20 years of carefully constructed lies. Ahead, the city lights blurred in the storm, marking the path home. In the 14 days since the docks, neutral leaders ratified peace terms, and the Fiore elders acknowledged Anaya as kin without claim on her. The autumn sun slanted through Matteo's office windows, warming the leather chairs where 3 syndicate representatives had just signed the final compact. Anaya traced her fingers over the fresh ink. The document outlined substantial funding for community mental health clinics and trafficking survivor support, backed by all families. A joint task force would dismantle what remained of Luca's operation, preventing future manipulation. Most significantly, Matteo would step back from day-to-day enforcement to chair strategic decisions, while Renzo managed security and Gia ran intelligence operations. It's real, she murmured, still processing the scope of change 2 weeks had brought. Matteo stood behind her chair, one hand resting on her shoulder. Because of you, she shook her head. Because we chose differently. The compact's final pages detailed her foundation structure, an independent board of civilian leaders overseeing fund allocation and program development. Her clinic would expand, maintaining strict confidentiality while accepting discreet referrals from families trying to help their own. Gia poked her head in, tablet in hand. Kitchen wants to know if we're still on for dinner. The staff's getting antsy. Anaya smiled. Tell them we're coming, and make sure Marco knows his garlic bread is non-negotiable. The long dining table gleamed in the evening light, set for 20. Guards who'd become family filed in, bringing wine and laughter. Renzo arrived with his teenage daughter, who immediately hugged Anaya and asked about her college counseling internship. Gia's wife brought their new baby, passing him around to be admired. Marco, the head of kitchen security, emerged with steaming platters of pasta and his famous garlic bread. He'd been teaching Anaya his grandmother's recipes, delighted to find someone who appreciated proper seasoning. Tonight he'd recreated her cardamom buns, presenting them with a flourish that made her laugh. Matteo watched from the head of the table as Anaya moved among their people, touching shoulders, asking about families, remembering details that made each person feel seen. The fearsome men who'd once guarded his empire now brought her small gifts, a new tea blend, a book they thought she'd like, photos of their children's achievements. She'd built this too, he realized, not with violence or intimidation, but with the same steady compassion that helped her clients heal. These hardened soldiers had become something closer to clan, bound by choice rather than fear. After dinner, Anaya wanted to check on her clinic's courtyard renovations. The space had been redesigned with better lighting and security features, while keeping the peaceful atmosphere her patients needed. Matteo drove them himself, enjoying the simple pleasure of her hand in his. The courtyard glowed with newly installed lanterns, their warm light catching the fountain's spray. Climbing vines softened the security camera's presence. A small herb garden scented the air, therapeutic for clients and practical for Anaya's stress-baking sessions. She walked the perimeter, checking that the panic buttons were discreetly placed yet accessible. Her practical side never forgot the dangers, even as she created safe spaces for healing. Matteo loved that about her, the steel beneath her softness. Perfect, she decided, turning back to him. Though we should add another bench near the rosemary. Already ordered, he said. Arrives tomorrow. She smiled, recognizing his careful attention to details that mattered to her. Always 3 steps ahead. Not always. He moved closer, taking both her hands in his. You surprised me from the first moment. Still do. The fountain burbled quietly as he reached into his pocket. The ring was simple, a band of platinum with a single inset diamond, elegant without ostentation. It caught the lantern light as he held it up. You offered me your life, he said softly. I'm giving you mine. Anaya's breath caught. She looked from the ring to his face, seeing the vulnerable hope in his eyes. This man who commanded empires with a gesture, asking rather than demanding. Yes, she whispered, and felt him exhale. His hands were steady as he slipped the ring onto her finger, but she saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Emotion held carefully in check. She rose on tiptoes to kiss him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips. His arms came around her, solid and secure, as familiar now as her own heartbeat. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching. Above them, the sky lightened with pre-dawn gold. The bay would be beautiful soon, sun rising over calm waters that had seen so much chaos and change. "We should get back," she murmured eventually. "I have a 9 a.m. client." He smiled against her hair. "And I have a board meeting about the new clinic funding." "Look at us being responsible adults." "Terrible, isn't it?" But his tone was warm with contentment. They walked hand in hand to the car, her ring catching the emerging sunlight. The clinic courtyard glowed behind them, a testament to what they'd built together. Safety without cages, protection without control, love without conditions. Renzo nodded from his discreet position by the gate, professional as always, but with a hint of satisfaction in his expression. He'd watched them find their way here, step by careful step. The city stirred around them, shops opening, boats heading out to sea. Somewhere in the growing light, Gia was probably already at her screens, monitoring the peace they'd won. In offices and safe houses, their extended family was waking to another day of chosen purpose rather than enforced loyalty. Mateo opened Anaya's door first, ever the protector, but waited for her to step in herself. She smiled at the gesture, his respect for her autonomy now as natural as breathing. The rising sun painted Naples in shades of gold and rose, blessing the city with new possibility. They had built something here, in the space between danger and devotion. Not perfect, but real. Not safe, but worth it. The day began.